Have you ever wondered what happens when humanity meets the galaxy's oldest and most powerful races? Why is it that some species believe Earth has no place in the cosmos, yet we're still here, standing tall? How did a seemingly fragile human become a force that even the galaxy's deadliest assassins fear? Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where we dive deep into the thrilling universe of alien encounters, high-stakes diplomacy, and underdog victories. In today's video, we're going to uncover the story of Michael Vastto, Earth's first diplomat to the Galactic Council. From seemingly innocuous meetings to deadly confrontations, Michael's journey will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about humans and the cosmos. But before we get started, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps us create even more exciting and high-quality content for you. Don't forget, this video is packed with crucial details, so stick around to the very end to fully grasp every twist and turn in Michael's journey. Ready to find out how one man could turn the tide for Earth? Let's jump right into it. The transport ship silently descended toward Century Prime Station, its engines humming with barely a sound as it hovered above the sprawling, shimmering complex. Michael Vastto, dressed in a simple, fitted black suit, stepped onto the sleek metallic floor of the station with a quiet grace that stood in stark contrast to the grandiose, alien surroundings. The floor beneath his boots gleamed under the soft glow of artificial lights, their cool blue hue illuminating the vast expanse of the station's entry bay. Around him, the alien crowd bustled in a symphony of colors, shapes, and textures. Tall, slender beings with translucent skin, furry creatures with multiple eyes, and beings of liquid energy that shimmered as if made of light itself. The space station was a living mosaic, a meeting point of thousands of worlds, each representative as diverse as the stars themselves. It was, for all intents and purposes, the center of the galaxy, and yet, as Michael stood at its heart, he was keenly aware of how out of place he seemed. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, earthy, metallic, and spicy all at once. Hollow ads floated lazily in the air, announcing the latest interstellar trade deals, exotic foods, and galactic events. Some aliens brushed past him without a second glance, their eyes glazed in indifference, while others shot him furtive glances, their expressions a mix of curiosity, disdain, and scorn. His skin prickled under the weight of their stares, some openly mocking, others tinged with disgust. The whispers from the crowd weren't lost on him either, carried through the murmur of foreign tongues. "That's the human," a tall blue-skinned alien with sharp, angular features murmured to a companion as they passed by. His slender fingers curled in a dismissive gesture as he looked Michael up and down, almost as if assessing the fragility of his existence. Michael's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles, the edges of his mouth barely moving. He'd anticipated this. Humanity was new to the galactic scene, and many of the older, more established races were not pleased with the sudden arrival of a species that had, in the span of just 15 years, surpassed the barriers of space travel and faster-than-light technology. Humans, after all, were wild cards new to the universe, yet quickly learning and adapting, mastering the very forces that the older civilizations had spent eons perfecting. To them, Earth and its people were little more than upstarts, interlopers who had dared to join the ranks of the stars too soon. Michael's pace was measured, almost unhurried, though the air around him was thick with tension. He passed an array of aliens, each one a striking figure of their own race, some with multicolored skin, others with long, flowing tendrils that coiled like serpents. Their eyes flickered toward him, and though most kept their distance, Michael could see the subtle discomfort in their movements. Some even took a deliberate step back, avoiding his presence as if he carried a subtle curse with him. The disdain was palpable, heavy enough to almost feel like a physical weight on his chest. A small green-skinned alien suddenly appeared at his side, almost appearing out of nowhere. Its forearms moved with fluid grace, its large black eyes focusing directly on Michael. The creature had a look of calm authority, but beneath the surface, Michael could see the barely contained hostility. "Human Vastto, I am Chair Clicks," it said, its voice smooth yet strangely mechanical. It extended one of its hands toward Michael, a gesture of both introduction and command. "Please follow me to your quarters. The council will convene in 3 hours." Michael nodded in response, not wasting words on pleasantries. He had learned quickly that silence was often the best form of communication when dealing with hostile and unpredictable beings. He had expected the cold reception, even if it still carried an unsettling edge, and now he had little time to dwell on it. The mission he had been sent on, a diplomatic one, was already at risk. The galactic powers would never accept humanity's rapid rise without questioning it, challenging it, and perhaps, in the end, attempting to snuff it out before it could grow into a true threat. As they walked through the wide corridors, Michael couldn't help but feel the eyes of the other aliens still following him. Whispers followed in his wake, and every so often, he could catch phrases like "too fragile," "too young," or "how long before they ruin everything." They didn't even bother to hide their contempt, their prejudices laid bare for all to see. But Michael remained unaffected. His strides were even, his hands still, though his mind was far from at rest. He had been trained for this. The human spirit could endure far worse than the sneers of alien diplomats. He had seen far darker things in his life, and this was nothing in comparison. His mind, sharp as ever, was focused on the mission, not the distractions around him. Finally, they reached a small room, far removed from the main chamber. It was plain, sparse, a reflection of the disrespect humans were given in this place. Michael's eyes quickly scanned the room, noticing the basic furnishings: a bed, a desk, a simple storage space, and a few small devices scattered about. It was as if they had expected him to remain insignificant, a footnote among the stars. Chair clicks bowed slightly, his eyes never leaving Michael's as he spoke once more, "I'll leave you to rest. Please be prepared for the council meeting shortly." As the green-skinned alien exited, Michael didn't sit immediately. Instead, he began to carefully examine the room. He knew what was expected of him here, not just as a diplomat, but as the representative of a species too eager to make its mark on the galaxy. And though the weight of this mission pressed down on him, he remained steady. He had come here to represent Earth, and Earth would not be silenced by alien disdain. He reached into his bag, pulled out the medallion, the book, and the pencil, 3 items that, for all their simplicity, carried a weight of history. He placed them on the table before him, the edges of the book worn, the medallion gleaming in the soft light of the room. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Michael stood in the middle of the small, dimly lit room, the faint hum of the station's cooling system the only sound that accompanied him. The walls, stark and metallic, seemed to close in around him, their cold surfaces reflecting the soft, artificial light that flickered overhead. Despite the simplicity of the room, barely furnished with a bed, a desk, and a small closet, Michael could feel the weight of its emptiness, as if the very space were designed to belittle him. He knew this place was meant to make him feel insignificant. This was not a room for a diplomat, let alone Earth's first representative to the Galactic Council. It was a room for a nobody. For an outsider, whose very existence was considered a mistake by some of the most ancient races in the galaxy. But Michael wasn't one to be intimidated. His sharp gray eyes scanned every corner of the room, his mind calculating the potential risks. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts, to see what others overlooked. Every inch of this place could hide a listening device or a hidden camera, and he had no intention of letting anyone, alien or otherwise, watch him without his consent. He moved with precision, a silent predator in a foreign world. His fingers brushed lightly against the walls as he checked for any seams, any irregularities in the smooth metal. He knew how these stations operated. Covert surveillance was a common practice here, especially for newcomers like himself. The humanoid security personnel, or agents of the council, likely watched his every move. It took no time at all for him to locate the first of the devices, a tiny, barely noticeable sensor tucked into the corner of the room, disguised as a small decorative light. His eyes narrowed, and with a swift motion, he pried it loose, dismantling it with ease. The next one was even more subtle, a camera disguised as a ventilation vent, barely visible among the station's numerous ducts. Michael smirked and disabled it too. By the time he finished his search, Michael had found 6 devices, all monitoring him in ways he couldn't yet comprehend, all linked to an unseen network. His hand hovered over the last one, a small wire leading to a hidden monitor embedded in the wall, its presence almost undetectable. With a subtle twist of his wrist, he severed the connection, rendering it useless. He stepped back, satisfied. There were no more eyes on him, at least, not in this room. The message was clear: he was no fool. The galaxy might underestimate him, but Michael Vastto knew how to keep his secrets. With a deep breath, he began to unpack his bag. The items inside were mundane, to the untrained eye nothing of importance, just personal belongings that made him feel anchored in the midst of alien chaos. A poetry book, its pages worn from years of use, a wooden pencil, its surface scratched and chipped from frequent sharpening, and a small medallion, a gift from his mentor back on Earth, one that Michael had carried with him through many battles. But these objects were not ordinary. They were symbols of humanity, strength, and something far darker than his official title might suggest. The medallion itself carried more weight than the galaxy could ever know. Michael carefully placed them on the table, aligning them with an exactness that betrayed a deep, personal ritual. Each item had its place, just as it always did. The poetry book opened to the first page, the pencil rested beside it, and the medallion was positioned at the center. As his fingers brushed the smooth surface of the medallion, Michael's mind wandered back to Earth, to the days before he became a diplomat. Back then, he had been something else entirely, something the Galactic Council and its representatives would never have imagined. Michael activated his secure tablet, a device specially designed to communicate with Earth Command without being intercepted. A message blinked on the screen, a cold reminder of the risks he faced. Message from Earth Command. Arrival safe. Reception cold. Preparing for the first council meeting. Proceed with caution. Intelligence suggests potential hostile action from the Dravari delegation. Michael read the message carefully, his expression hardening with each word. The Dravari. He had anticipated trouble from them. A warrior race with red scales and a reputation for aggression. They had no love for humans, and their leaders had made it clear that they considered Earth a threat to the established order. But Michael wasn't afraid. He had dealt with far worse than political posturing. He'd faced enemies whose names were whispered in fear across the galaxy, mercenaries, assassins, and warriors who had tasted the true cost of underestimating him. His thumb moved over the tablet's screen, typing his response, his fingers steady. Michael Vastto's reply. Understood. Dravari threat potential, but they won't be the ones to dictate the terms. I will attend the meeting and handle the situation as necessary. He sent the message, the words a declaration of intent. Michael's expression remained stoic, his mind already shifting to the next challenge. The stakes were higher than any diplomatic negotiation he had encountered. The galaxy's most powerful races were watching him, scrutinizing every move. But Michael had never been one to shy away from a challenge. As he set the tablet down, a strange feeling washed over him, something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of being watched, not just by the Dravari or the Council, but by forces far beyond their control. It was a familiar feeling, one he had experienced countless times during his days in Earth's special forces. Back then, he had lived in the shadows, his every step calculated, his every move a step closer to the edge. And now, here he was again, standing on the precipice of something far greater. The Dravari may have underestimated him, but they would soon learn that humans, especially this one, were not to be trifled with. Michael stood, his eyes scanning the room once more, his mind already shifting to the next phase of the mission. The council meeting awaited, and he would be ready. The grand hall was a vast, opulent space, its walls alive with the buzz of conversation from 100 different species. The air was rich with unfamiliar fragrances, sharp metallic scents from the Zarathians, the sweet floral notes of the Andar, and the sharp tang of the Dravari, whose scent always hinted at aggression. Lights flickered from floating orbs that hovered like fireflies, casting a warm glow over the carefully arranged refreshment tables laden with exotic foods from every corner of the galaxy. Hollow screens displayed distant worlds, and holographic dancers moved fluidly across the floor, weaving in and out of reality in mesmerizing spirals. At first glance, Michael appeared as nothing more than a shadow among the bright and animated guests. The aliens mingled freely, exchanging stories, laughter, and drinks, all seemingly oblivious to his presence. Some shot him a fleeting glance, others a prolonged look of disdain, but none approached. Their judgment was palpable. He was an outsider, a human, the newest species to the stars, one that had barely managed to step into the galaxy before the elders of the council had formed opinions about him. Michael kept his posture straight, his hands held casually in front of him as he moved between groups, his steps silent but deliberate. The low hum of the hall's energy was the only thing that filled his ears. He could feel the stares, like invisible fingers tracing the back of his neck. Some alien species found humans curious, others repulsive. He had no illusions about how the older races viewed Earth. He walked past a group of Tolerans, tall beings with crystalline skin, their voices melodic as they conversed in their native tongue. They didn't even glance at him. The Nabrain, short but built like stone, exchanged murmurs, their eyes fixed firmly on the Zerpa delegate next to them. Michael could sense that the atmosphere had shifted subtly in his presence. Hostility, though veiled, was present everywhere. Then, a voice broke through the murmur of conversation, sharp and cold, like the crack of thunder in the silence. "So, this is Earth's best." The voice dripped with condescension, and Michael immediately recognized the speaker. Ambassador Krall of the Dravari delegation stood before him, towering with crimson scales glistening under the lights. His features were sharp, his face carved like a predator's mask, with glowing yellow eyes that locked onto Michael with open disdain. The Dravari were a race of warriors tall, fierce, and quick to violence. Their reputation for brutality was well known across the galaxy. Krall, however, had made it his personal mission to insult the human presence here. He leaned in slightly, his voice a low growl meant for Michael's ears alone. "You don't belong here. Your kind's so new to this, why don't you just go back to your dirt-covered planet?" Michael remained motionless, his face neutral, his gray eyes cold but calm. He had been expecting this. He had been ready for the insults, the mockery. He didn't respond immediately, knowing that showing any reaction would give Krall the upper hand. He let the words hang in the air, thick and heavy, like a weapon in the form of a question. Suddenly, in one swift motion, Krall raised his hand and knocked the drink from Michael's hand. The glass shattered, scattering droplets of liquid across the floor. The room fell silent, a sharp collective gasp echoing through the hall. All eyes turned toward Michael, and for the briefest moment, the hum of the room seemed to cease. Krall sneered, his teeth flashing as he mocked Michael's composure. How fitting. The human diplomat is nothing but a servant, weak, fragile. His voice was thick with venom, the words intentionally sharp. "You can't even hold a drink properly, let alone hold your own in the council. You don't belong here. Leave now, and we may let you live." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. The other guests watched with bated breath, some uncertain whether this was an exchange between two dignitaries or something far more dangerous. Michael's eyes never wavered. Calm. His lips curled slightly upward into a small, controlled smile, more of a challenge than an apology. "Perhaps," Michael replied quietly, his voice carrying a calm weight that cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "But here we are." His words hung in the air, settling in the space between him and the Dravari. He did not raise his voice. He did not show anger. He simply acknowledged Krall's challenge without flinching. His composure, the very act of remaining unshaken, only seemed to make Krall angrier. The room was still, but it buzzed with silent judgments. The Dravari ambassador's face twisted with rage, his eyes narrowing. He took a threatening step forward, the air around him thick with the scent of brimstone. "You've just signed your death sentence. Leave now, or there will be an accident, one that might not be so easily dismissed." The weight of his words was heavy. Threatening. His voice rang out in the room, causing some of the onlookers to glance nervously toward one another. The challenge was clear, Michael was no longer just a diplomat in their eyes. He was a target. But Michael did not respond to the threat. Instead, he stood tall and composed, unfazed by the Dravari's crude display of power. Slowly, he turned and walked away from Krall, leaving him standing in the center of the room, the once predictable mockery now replaced with a palpable feeling of unease in the air. The crowd parted slightly as Michael moved through them, his steps measured and deliberate. As he walked, his mind calculated the next move, but outwardly, he appeared perfectly serene, his face giving nothing away. He knew exactly what he had done. He had made an enemy today, but that was by design. The Dravari ambassador was now aware that Michael Vastto was no mere diplomat. He was someone to be reckoned with. And Michael had no intention of leaving anytime soon. The night on Century Prime Station was eerily quiet, the usual hum of the complex now muted in the late hours. The lights had dimmed to a soft blue glow, casting long shadows against the cold walls. Michael Vastto sat alone in his quarters, his back against the wall, still contemplating the events that had unfolded earlier. Despite his calm exterior, the tension in the air was thick, suffocating. He could feel the weight of the galactic politics pressing down on him, but something deeper, darker was beginning to unfold. Something he had prepared for, yet hoped would never come. As Michael stared at the quiet holographic displays projecting distant planets and stars, a sudden movement caught his eye. A small blue-skinned alien slipped into the room, its features sharp and angular, almost insect-like in appearance. The alien's skin glimmered under the dim light, its large, black eyes wide with urgency. It was clearly trying to remain unnoticed, moving in the shadows with practiced ease. "Human Vastto," it whispered in a hushed tone, its voice trembling slightly. Michael's instincts flared. He was accustomed to being watched, but this was different. This alien's presence felt urgent, desperate. I have information. The Dravari are planning something deadly. Before the alien could say more, a sharp, swift motion pierced the silence. A small dart, barely visible in the dim light, shot from an unseen source and struck the alien in the neck. The creature gasped once, its eyes wide with shock, before crumpling to the floor with a sickening thud. Michael's heart raced as he rushed to the fallen alien's side, his fingers trembling as he checked for a pulse. There was none. The dart was too quick, too efficient, poisoned or laced with something far more lethal than anything he had encountered before. His breath hitched, but he quickly regained his composure, scanning the room for any sign of movement, his mind already running through possible scenarios. Before he could act, the door to his quarters slid open with a soft hiss, and 2 security officers stepped in, their uniformed figures casting long shadows in the room. They took in the scene in a mere instant: the dead alien, Michael standing over it with a look of grim determination, and immediately began their standard procedure. "Tragic accident," one of them muttered, already turning to examine the body. His tone was dismissive, the words almost mechanical. "Looks like a bad reaction to something he ate. No foul play involved." Michael stood still, his gaze fixed on the officers as they fumbled with the body, performing their routine cover-up. He could see it now: the story was already being crafted. They would sweep this under the rug, make it look like a simple food-related accident, and move on. The Dravari would be allowed to continue their machinations, and Michael would be none the wiser. But he wasn't buying it. Not for a second. The Dravari were behind this, no question. They had already shown their hostility, and now they were sending a message: eliminate anyone who might pose a threat to their plans. Michael's fingers moved to the secure tablet at his side, his mind already shifting into diplomatic mode. The protocol was clear. He typed swiftly, the screen lighting up with a coded message that only Earth Command could decode. His words were succinct, to the point. "The situation is worse than expected. Dravari planning direct action. Request extraction." He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the screen. The weight of his next words felt heavy, as if they carried the finality of a decision that would alter everything. He pressed send. Then, as the officers continued their work, oblivious to his movements, Michael reached down to his bag. He opened it carefully, his fingers brushing the fabric as he felt the edges of the false bottom he had installed. With a quiet motion, he slid it open, revealing the hidden compartment. Inside, he carefully placed the medallion, pencil, and the poetry book, the objects he had placed in his quarters earlier, when he had been naive enough to think he had left his past behind. He took a long breath, his mind racing. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission anymore. This was something far darker, far more dangerous. He had known the risks of being thrust into the heart of galactic politics, but the threats were becoming too real now. His past was catching up to him, and there was no way out. As he sealed the compartment, Michael whispered to himself, a small smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I thought I was out, but now I'm back." The message from Earth Command came back quickly, a simple code that told him everything he needed to know. The reply was brief, but its meaning was clear. Extraction not possible. Survive by any means. His stomach tightened as he read the words. There would be no easy escape. The Council, the Dravari, they were all hunting him now. They would not stop until he was silenced, until he became another forgotten casualty in the shadowed halls of power. Michael straightened, his expression hardening as he prepared for what was to come. The night was only beginning, and he had no intention of becoming prey. He could hear the soft click of the door as it slid open again. This time, it was the sound of footsteps that sent a chill down his spine. The hunt had already begun. And Michael was ready. Century Prime Station was broken only by the soft hum of the station's mechanical heart, deep beneath the floors. The low, rhythmic vibration in the walls barely registered against the stillness that had settled in Michael's quarters. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the night lights reflecting off the metallic walls, their cold surfaces gleaming in muted shades of gray. Michael lay still on the bed, eyes closed, but his mind never stopped working. He wasn't truly asleep, he hadn't been for hours. His body may have appeared at rest, but his senses were on high alert. Outside, the station pulsed with life as its other inhabitants went about their evening routines. But in Michael's quarters, a different kind of tension gripped the air. Darkness settled over the room like a thick fog, each corner shrouded in shadow. In the stillness, you could almost feel the presence of something unnatural moving through the space, quiet, calculated, and deadly. Suddenly, the door to Michael's quarters slid open with a soft hiss, a barely audible sound in the night. A team of Dravari assassins stepped inside. Their presence was disguised at first, their movements fluid, soundless. The Dravari were known for their strength and guile, but they were also the best at moving in the shadows, striking without warning. Their sleek, red-scaled armor shimmered faintly in the low light, their eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. They spread out across the room, their breathing synchronized, each assassin moving with purpose. Their sonic blades were drawn, silent weapons capable of cutting through the toughest material without a sound. They'd been sent by Kral, the Dravari ambassador, to ensure Michael's permanent silence. The orders had been clear: eliminate the human diplomat without leaving a trace. The assassins' footsteps were measured, a deliberate attempt to avoid detection. They fanned out, their eyes scanning the room, taking in every inch of the space. They'd been trained to find weakness, to uncover secrets that others might overlook. But they didn't expect what was waiting for them. The lights overhead flickered once, a brief, unsettling flash that caused the assassins to pause for a moment. They exchanged wary glances. The room seemed to shift in the moment between darkness and light, as if the very atmosphere had changed. And then, it came, the voice. Michael's voice, calm, cold, and eerily clear, echoed from the shadows. "You should have brought more men." The words sliced through the room like a blade, chilling the air. The assassins froze, their eyes darting to the bed where Michael had been lying. The figure there was unmoving, still. But Michael was not there. The bed was empty. A shiver ran down the spine of the lead assassin. They knew what was coming. The human wasn't as vulnerable as they had been led to believe. Their fingers tightened around their weapons as they fanned out further, searching the room for the source of the voice. The room was silent again, too silent, the oppressive stillness building like a storm on the horizon. The assassins' movements became faster, more erratic as they searched the shadows. Suddenly, the darkness seemed to shift, a blur of motion. One of the assassins swung his sonic blade, aiming for what he thought was a shadow moving in the corner. But there was no resistance. He swung again, this time blindly, but he found nothing but air. Then, Michael appeared in a blur, moving faster than they had anticipated. His hand shot out, the cord of his medallion wrapping around the assassin's throat like a vice. With a swift tug, the assassin collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, his weapon falling uselessly to the side. Before the others could react, Michael was on them. He moved with an eerie, almost unnatural speed, his hands and feet a blur as he disarmed the second assassin. The pencil he had placed earlier, so seemingly insignificant, was now in his hand, its tip gleaming. He used it as a weapon, driving it into the assassin's throat with a quick, precise motion, the sound of cracking bones filling the air. The third assassin attempted to counterattack, but Michael had already anticipated the move. He reached out, snatching the assassin's wrist with an iron grip, and twisted it violently, breaking the bones in the process. As the assassin dropped to the floor, Michael didn't hesitate. He quickly finished the job with a swift strike to the neck. The final assassin, the leader, stood frozen, his blade raised. His eyes were wide with disbelief, his mouth opening in shock as he stared at Michael, who was now standing tall amidst the bodies of his fallen comrades. "What are you?" the assassin gasped, his voice trembling. Michael didn't flinch. His voice was calm, almost detached, as if this was nothing but another part of his job. "Just a diplomat." Before the assassin could react, Michael reached out and snatched the blade from his hand. In a fluid motion, he drove the blade into the assassin's chest, the man falling silent in an instant. The room was still, death hanging in the air. The bodies of the Dravari assassins lay sprawled across the floor, a silent testament to Michael's swift and merciless efficiency. He stood there for a moment, breathing calmly, his mind already shifting to the next task. With a quiet exhale, he returned to his bed, his movements smooth and deliberate, as though nothing had happened. The bodies in the room were already starting to fade from his mind. He had done what needed to be done. As he lay back down, the holographic clock above his bed displayed the time. It was still early. The night had just begun. The silence in the room was complete as council security arrived minutes later, their footsteps echoing down the hall. They entered, finding the room exactly as they had left it except for the bodies of the assassins, now lifeless on the floor. "What happened here?" one of the security officers muttered, kneeling down to check the bodies. He inspected the assassins briefly, but there was nothing to explain their sudden deaths. The only conclusion he could come to was that this was some tragic accident, perhaps a training mishap or internal conflict. But no one dared to suggest that the human diplomat might have been involved. The Dravari would cover this up, of course. The question was no longer about how or why the assassins had died, it was about how Michael Vastto had survived. Outside the room, security began to murmur among themselves, but the whispers would never reach Michael. He had already become something far more than they had expected. Something much darker than a mere diplomat. And they still had no idea who he really was. The council chamber was vast, a cathedral of polished stone and shimmering glass that stretched far above and below. The air was thick with power, as if the very atmosphere was charged with the weight of the hundreds of species that filled the room. Large holographic projections floated above the long, curved tables, displaying maps of distant galaxies, trade routes, and military positions. The seats were filled with alien representatives, beings of all shapes and sizes, their eyes sharp and watchful. Some had multiple faces, others had no faces at all, but all shared one thing in common: they were watching Michael. The doors of the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, and Michael Vastto entered. He walked with measured steps, his dark eyes unblinking, his expression calm. The whispers of the room died down as his presence filled the space, his every movement precise, calculated. In his simple black suit, he stood out like a shadow among the brightly dressed delegates. The Dravari, however, seemed to avoid his gaze completely, their red-scaled bodies stiff and tense as they whispered among themselves. Michael's eyes briefly met those of Chancellor Vorfax, the towering purple-skinned leader of the Galactic Council. Vorfax's 6 eyes glinted with cold calculation, his posture rigid and authoritative. There was no love lost between them, not after what had transpired. Michael could feel the weight of the Chancellor's glare, but he did not flinch. Vorfax cleared his throat and stood, his voice booming across the chamber. "Michael Vastto, you stand here now as the representative of Earth, but I find myself questioning your loyalty to this council. What happened last night?" "The assassins." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward Michael, waiting for his response. The Dravari delegation tensed further, their gazes flickering toward Michael with barely concealed fear. The failed assassination had been a direct challenge to the council's authority, and Michael knew that he was being called to account for it. But Michael did not flinch. He stood tall, his face an unreadable mask. His mind was already several steps ahead, carefully navigating the political landscape that had shifted under his feet. He had anticipated this confrontation. He had known the moment he walked into this room that this would be the test, the moment he either established his authority or crumbled under the pressure. With deliberate slowness, he took his seat at the back of the council table, his eyes never leaving Vorfax's. The hushed murmurings of the delegates faded into the background as Michael's voice broke through the tension. "I believe that the Dravari delegation has made a grave mistake." Michael's tone was soft but steady, each word measured and carefully chosen. "But I also believe that humanity, unlike the Dravari, believes in understanding and cooperation, not violence. Perhaps that is why we are here today, at the table of this esteemed council." A ripple of unease spread through the room at his words. The Dravari representatives shifted in their seats, their eyes narrowing, but Michael didn't look at them. He wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking to the others, those who had witnessed the Dravari's blatant aggression. "We humans have a saying," Michael continued, his voice still calm, still carrying the weight of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "It's better to walk with an open hand than a closed fist. But it seems that the Dravari have not learned this lesson." His words were like a subtle dagger, aimed not at Kral but at the entire council. The room grew uncomfortably quiet, every representative suddenly aware that Michael had shifted the conversation from his own defense to the failings of the Dravari. The tension in the chamber was palpable, the air thick with the weight of the unspoken. Michael allowed the silence to stretch, letting the council wrestle with his words. The Dravari now looked cornered, and Michael knew they would not be able to respond without revealing their hostility. They had planned to eliminate him, but they had underestimated humanity. Finally, Chancellor Vorfax spoke again, his voice tinged with irritation but unable to mask a flicker of unease. "This council is not your personal platform, human. You will show respect." Michael's gray eyes flickered toward Vorfax, and for a moment, the two locked gazes. But Michael didn't rise to the bait. Instead, He spoke softly, his next words carrying an unexpected weight. "Respect, Chancellor? I believe respect must be earned, not demanded. And I believe that Earth has earned its seat here at this table, just as much as any of you." A low murmur spread among the delegates, some exchanging quick, sidelong glances. Michael had planted a seed, and now the council would have to grapple with the truth of what he had said. The Dravari, despite their aggression, had made a fatal error underestimating the human spirit and its capacity for survival. As the debate raged on, Michael remained silent, his eyes flickering only briefly toward the list he had hidden in his bag. In the dark recesses of his mind, he was already preparing the next move. The Dravari assassins had failed. Their attempt had been sloppy, but Michael would use this opportunity to his advantage. As the discussions continued, his mind worked swiftly, crossing off names on the list in his head, the Dravari among them. Michael knew that the next phase of his mission was approaching. He wasn't just representing Earth anymore, he was becoming something more. A force the Council would have to reckon with. He had just made his first move. The Council chamber was quiet now, the voices of the various representatives fading into the background as High Chancellor Vorfax sat at the head of the table. His 6 eyes stared at the holographic display in front of him, his expression a mixture of contempt and impatience. The silence in the room was stifling, almost suffocating. The mood had shifted, his previous confidence had crumbled under the weight of the growing uncertainty. A sudden, sharp ping echoed through the room. Vorfax's eyes narrowed as a message flashed across his screen. His hand hovered above the controls as he read the words, his grip tightening around the edge of the table. The message was simple, unsettling in its directness. "You shouldn't have touched the Diplomat." Michael's voice reverberated through the station, cold and calculated, like an unspoken promise. The High Chancellor's heart skipped a beat as he looked up, his fingers trembling slightly. Before Vorfax could react, the room's lights flickered, their steady glow momentarily giving way to a brief, unsettling darkness. A pulse of static ran through the chamber, followed by a strange, eerie hum. Then, in an instant, every communication screen across the station flickered to life. Michael's face appeared on each one, his expression calm, unyielding. His voice filled the room, louder now, as if echoing from every corner of the station. "Tell Vorfax I'm coming for him next." The words cut through the silence like a blade. A shiver of dread passed through the council members as they watched the figure of Michael appear on the screens. His expression was serene, but there was something chilling in his eyes, something primal, unforgiving. His calm demeanor spoke volumes, but it was the quiet intensity in his voice that sent a ripple of unease through the room. The power had shifted. The council, once so confident in its control, now found itself at the mercy of the human diplomat. Vorfax's face went pale as he looked up from the screen, his eyes flickering to his security detail, the rest of the council frozen in stunned silence. The murmurs of disbelief filled the air, but Vorfax could feel the tension mounting. Michael had made his move. He wasn't just a diplomat anymore, he was something else entirely. In the shadows, Michael had already set his plan into motion. The station's carefully designed infrastructure, the communication systems, the security protocols, the vital systems, all of it had been compromised. Michael had planted explosives in key locations, disabled critical systems, and ensured that nothing would work in the way it was supposed to. The chaos was already unfolding. The lights above flickered again, casting long, stretching shadows across the council room, as if the station itself was breathing in sync with the rising tension. The holographic map of the galaxy displayed above the central table began to glitch, the once smooth images distorting into fractured, broken fragments. Panic began to spread among the representatives. They reached for their communication devices, but none of them responded. The air was thick with the realization that they were completely exposed. The station was no longer in their control. Chancellor Vorfax stood abruptly, his hands clenched into fists, his eyes wide with anger and fear. "What is this?" he roared, his voice betraying the panic beginning to rise within him. The security guards moved quickly toward the exit, but the shields had already been disabled. The once impenetrable barriers now offered no protection. Vorfax knew that this was the moment of reckoning. Michael's voice echoed once more, this time through the station's loudspeakers, resonating through every hall, every room, as if he were everywhere at once. "I gave you a chance to understand." His voice was low, chilling. "Now, you'll learn what happens when you underestimate Earth." At that moment, the holographic displays around the room flickered again. The entire station seemed to shake, a low, rumbling thrum vibrating the walls. There was a sudden explosion on one of the lower levels, followed by a blinding flash of light. The entire station seemed to groan as if it were buckling under the weight of its own secrets being exposed. In the council chamber, the representatives were scrambling now, but it was too late. Michael had already won. They had been distracted, too focused on their own power, to see the true danger coming from the human they had once dismissed. A final transmission came through from Michael. His image appeared again on the council's screens, calm as ever, his eyes reflecting a cold, resolute promise. This is just the beginning. The Dravari, once so confident in their strength, were now paralyzed by the realization that their assassin had failed. The Zarathians, Nexians, and other races, who had once believed themselves above Earth, now had to reckon with the reality Earth was no longer the weak, isolated species they had assumed it to be. Michael's figure flickered out of the screens as quickly as it had appeared, and the council members were left in the aftermath of their miscalculations. The lights returned to normal, but the damage was done. Their entire infrastructure was crippled, their plans in disarray. And as the chaos spread across the station, one thought lingered in every mind: they had underestimated humanity. So, what have we learned from Michael Vastto's journey? How did humanity manage to stand its ground against the most powerful forces in the galaxy? From a simple diplomat to a shadow in the dark, Michael's story is a testament to the strength, resilience, and unpredictability of humankind. Do you think the Council and the Dravari have truly learned their lesson, or will they continue to underestimate Earth? Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure: Earth is no longer a bystander in this vast galaxy, it's a force to be reckoned with. If you enjoyed this story and want more high-stakes sci-fi, make sure to like this video and subscribe to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story. We're just getting started, and your support means the world to us. Don't forget to share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Together, we'll keep exploring the stars and uncovering the hidden truths of the universe. Remember, this is just the beginning, so stay tuned for more incredible stories from the farthest reaches of space. See you in the next video.